It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again, time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 348. Tonight I'm joined by Emo.
Hello.
Ashgar.
Nah.
Kodra.
Hi.
Tam.
Hello.
And Phelan.
Hi there.
If anything sounds weird this week, I'm on a new machine, and we're hoping I got everything copied over successfully.
Hopefully.
For the most part, I think it sounds about the same. The same mic, so... we have a long list of topics, and I doubt we're going to get through most of them. So this has been kind of talked around for several weeks. But I know there is a group of folks on this podcast that have been playing Mechwarrior 5 and messing around with mods and such.
We had been playing a lot of Mechwarrior 5, mostly entirely modded.
Back before the current DLC.
Before the current DLC, at which point none of the mods worked, and it sounds like the modding community is not really going to do those things again, or a lot of the things that we were using are not being brought forward. And it's interesting. I think there's a bit of disagreement on this podcast as to whether this was a good thing or not.
Yeah, so these were mods that did things like improve the NPC AI, because by default it was very bad, and allowed you full access to the mech lab to change out components on your mech.
Yeah.
Notably to swap out engines, because some mechs are really garbage with the default engine. I'm looking at you, Banshee.
Oh, it's the classic example, but who really wants to be in a 25-ton mech that goes 34 kilometers a minute, or an hour, 34 clicks?
I mean, nobody wants to be in an urban mech to begin with, but that just makes it even worse.
But yeah, we were playing the MDB5 Mercs Reloaded mod, which allowed you to have a bunch of different customizations. It also allowed you to have stuff like XL engines, which take up more slots, but are lighter weight for the speed profile they are going at. And in Mechwarrior, in Mechwarrior, there became a balance where you were planning around both the tonnage your mech can allow and also the number of slots you have open. In the base game, you really were primarily focused on the tonnage and then the weapon slots that were available. There were no other slots for other types of gear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in the base game, a mech's weapon slots are limited both by type, so they're either energy or missile or ballistic weapons, but also by the size of the slot. So that energy slot, may only be big enough to mount a medium laser. You may not be able to even have the option of putting a PPC or a large laser on it. Whereas with the mod, as long as you had the space on that section of the mech, you could mount whatever weapon of the appropriate type for that slot.
Yeah. Well, and here's where I think I get controversial, because we played that way. We played with the mod, which basically got rid of weapon size classes as a concept and just gave them slots. But because the mech lab didn't actually have didn't have a significantly different number of available slots per mech, especially within the same size class, it meant that once you found, there wasn't a lot of reason to change mechs, and mechs, there wasn't a lot of, I didn't find that there to be a lot of texture between why you would select one mech over another one. It was purely, does it have the slots you want?
Yeah, the only real differentiation between mechs was tonnage and how many slots and what body locations they were in.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think that and what's been interesting is we've jumped into the DLC where we don't have this mod and we can't edit it. There's been a lot of really interesting, hey, what can we do with this mech? Like, this is a bigger mech than we had before, but it's got a weird weapon loadout. Can we make that work? And I think that's pretty interesting. It helps that the DLC radically rebalanced all of the weapons and added a bunch of new ones to make for some more interesting choices.
Yeah. I would also say that I think looking back, I would be more okay if the slots, if they maintained the like large, small, medium, large slot in the mech lab. But what I'm really missing right now is the ability to be like, okay, I want to, like, when I was playing with the mech lab, I was all about, I can be a little bit more of a gearhead. I want to like try and find a high class engine, and I want to sort of tune, like, this engine is a little bit too heavy for this mech, but it gets me the speed I want, and like, can I fine tune this mech to exactly where I want it to be? I think in a lot of cases, I would have been okay if there was a limitation on what weapons I could do, as long as I had a little bit more freedom with what other ancillary components I was putting in. Like, can I fit both an XLR and also an armor kit on this mech?
Yeah, and I think that that's that feels like a big loss.
Yeah.
For and in a lot of ways, they did a bunch of things to kind of ameliorate that. Like, mech speeds are kind of up across the board, but yeah, you just don't have that same level of tuning. And I think it'd be really interesting. I know that the mod community, the original Reloaded mod isn't being updated, but there's a spin-off. And it's going to be interesting to see what design choices they make there. I do think that the one other thing that we ran into with the base game, and part of this was because we weren't switching around mechs as much once we found the ones we liked, but there's a lot more money sinks.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot more money sinks, but also a lot more money fountains. So there's just more flow of cash, and I think that's good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially because the DLC added a completely secondary progression system, which is, I think it is attempting to change to improve the kind of tweaking that you would want to do. I don't know that it's quite there, but it's a really compelling system. It's basically they add a bunch of side quests that add additional objectives in missions. And as you complete them, you get XP towards one of a handful of trees. And each tree, every time you level up the tree, you get a new like specialty mech component that you can use to fine tune some specific thing about a mech.
Yep.
And they're pretty spendy to install, but they're great.
They're also a good reason for you to pick up hero mechs, because hero mechs can load in more of them.
Yes.
And while there was definitely a reason,
that's actually a compelling reason to pick them up, other than their paint job.
Yeah. Whereas before, like, there were a couple of hero mechs that were really good because of what their initial loadout was, but there were a couple that were just, why would I want this? Yeah.
Well, that's where the like weapon limitations, I think, go back to being interesting. Because like, for example, a mech that I've always loved is the Shadowhawk, and the Shadowhawk in Reloaded is kind of garbage because the thing that it's good at is meaningless.
Yeah.
Because the thing that makes the Shadowhawk interesting is that it's a medium mech with 2 large weapon slots on it, which is a lot for a medium mech. But as soon as you get rid of the size classifications, then it's just a mech with 3 weapon slots, and you're like, wow, what a piece of trash. But I do miss the engine tweaking. And like hunting down. I think that hunting down rare parts is still interesting and compelling.
I mean, I was doing degenerate things. Like, my favorite mech, I was flying in the face of all conventional wisdom in the Reloaded, because my favorite mech was a 45-ton Phoenix Hawk that had 8 medium lasers on it, because I wanted to go as fast as possible. Whereas the conventional wisdom is just bring the heaviest mech you possibly can, because that's how you get the best weapons, right?
I mean, ideally the game should be balanced such that what you really want is like an assault mech and like maybe one of each size class, or like basically a light mech, because light mechs are fast and scouting actually means something. And basically in the tabletop there is absolutely a role for lighter mechs, and it just seems like that's really hard to successfully do in the PC games. Like it just never seems to work out that way. Heavier mechs have to be better because people need something to aspire to, and thus heavier mechs are just better. Like I'm specifically remembering a story that a friend of mine loves to tell about how he made a player basically rage quit by tricking him into thinking that he had taken out his forces and bringing his Atlas up, and then no. and it basically depended on proper use of lighter mechs.
Was there like a fog of war in the tabletop game or something?
Yeah, I mean, it's been so long since I played the tabletop, but yeah, there's an aspect of you can only see what what you're up to, what you're at, and you can keep forces in reserve, kind of like, I don't know, I think similar to how Warhammer has got, like, you can have reserve forces. It's a similar thing like that.
Okay.
But it was one of those things where like your mechs could use each other's like sensor ranges.
Yeah. And yeah,
So-
targeting is based on that, and you had, mechs with things like narcs and like targeting lasers. So you could have a light mech that, went forward and was really hard to hit because it's so fast. They could help your heavier mechs target better.
Or extend the effective range.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, oh, the light mech is getting me a missile lock, so I can shoot this thing from across the map.
Yeah.
Which is a cool bit of synergy, but I think you'd need to lean more into like the team play aspect, because that's definitely a thing that BattleTech does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want a more balanced group in BattleTech.
But I do like the DLC. I think the DLC adds a bunch of neat features, and I'll be interested to see like what mods roll out for it. But it's such a better ramp than the original, and I like the just hop in and do a campaign, just because it gets that fun. I think the absolute best part of that game is that you've just gotten one or two new mechs and you're working your way up towards upgrading your whole lance before you're all sitting in assault mechs, because you're just excited about whatever new mech you might find. And it's like, all right, well, is this the mech I would choose? No, but it's a heavy.
My favorite part of any game like that is that point where you've got enough stuff to be in pretty good shape, but there's a lot more still to acquire, and plenty of opportunities to come across new stuff and try to figure out how to make it fit into how you're doing things now and upgrade your stuff, etc. Like, I don't know, I mean, it's the same thing with like Skyrim for me. Once I'm in full, the ebony armor or whatever, I'm kind of bored. Once I've got a full lance of, assault mechs, and I've got every mech I'm ever going to want, and nothing more to hunt.
Well, but that's where like, I think once you have assault mechs, that's why I liked the mod where it's like, okay, you have an assault mech, but now it's time for us to go looking for lost tech to really make those assault mechs sing.
Yeah. Which is good. And then but you still hit the thing where like once you're fully tricked out in lost tech, you're like, eh.
And then it's time for the game to be over.
Yep.
I think this is your card, Tam. Outer Wilds.
Oh yeah. So this has been on my
Not to be
list
confused with Outer Worlds.
Yes. Like,
yeah, I mix those up a lot.
They are radically different games.
Extremely. But they launched at similar times.
They did. Outer Wilds. So I've had Outer Wilds on my to play list since it came out, and hadn't, for a variety of reasons, hadn't gotten around to it. And there's not a lot I can say about it that isn't a spoiler. But it's doing some really, really, really cool stuff. Like it was pitched as you're a space explorer trying to figure out what's going on in this solar system, which I'm vaguely interested in, but that sounds a little dry for my tastes. What nobody pointed out is that it's all like these weird cartoony aliens that you're dealing with that are like a weirdly tiny solar system. So it's just got a really fun scale and just a super charming aesthetic, and a really interesting core puzzle loop as you try to figure out what's going on. And it does involve navigating in space in 3D, which is definitely a challenge. But it's really interesting. It's like it's a totally combat-free game as far as I've seen. And it's this sort of interesting exploration as you piece together what's happening and what's going on in bits and pieces and try to turn it into something coherent. And it's got a really, really great tracking system for all of the stuff that you found, which I think is great. It's a big problem that like Myst style puzzlers have failed at, is like, okay, I've done a bunch of things, but it's hard to remember what I've done, and it's hard to remember what I found out about what I've done. And Outer Wilds does a really good job of helping you track that and figure out where should you go next to look for stuff. Plus, it's got fun puzzles and interesting flight mechanics.
Very interesting flight mechanics. It's can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, like flight mechanics are definitely the hard part, but it's also like a huge part of the gameplay. And you know, sometimes, and it's where the scale gets really funny, because like sometimes you've got a planet that's a little bit too small, so maybe you've got those like you've got the rocket pack, like maybe don't use it too much because you don't want to leave orbit. You could jump a little too high. It's got a very Mario Galaxy feel to it.
It's bad to achieve escape velocity when you didn't mean to.
Yeah, and some really weird puzzles.
I feel like I didn't find the puzzles. I feel like I played that game a little bit and did not find the game.
I mean, there are pretty much everywhere you can go has something to piece together. Some piece of the puzzle to piece together. It's like, I don't know if it's so much, it's like some of it is puzzles and some of it is also like trying to figure out what threads to pull and pulling on a thread until you unravel something helpful. There's a lot of like figuring out where to go next and figuring out how all of these things connect, figuring out an interface. Like, how do I either get from point A to point B, or how do I figure out this alien interface?
Yeah. To
make it do a thing. But it's super charming. It's got a definitely weird ending that like it would be very, and I mentioned the ending only because games that are doing some of the like weird types of storytelling that this one is can sometimes fail to satisfy, and I found this one pretty satisfying. Plus, you find people by listening to them play the banjo. You've got like or the harmonica or whatever. You've got like a radio listener, and everybody's playing with their instrument on whatever far-flung random planet. So you just home in on people by listening for their music. It's very folksy. Also, your ship is made of wood.
What?
Yeah.
Your ship is made of wood. It's about as fragile as you might expect. Sometimes you might need to get out and hammer it back together. It can be a problem. They don't blow up as much as they used to, I'm told.
Wood is not known to be a great spacefaring material unless you're in Spelljammer.
I mean, it works well enough as long as you don't like crash it into anything too hard or set it on fire.
I mean, even then, is it actually good?
No, your ship is pretty ramshackle. Like, don't get me wrong, but it's charmingly ramshackle. It's sort of a wonder you have a space program at all.
So next up, is like several of these games we've had on the list and we've not talked about. Biomutant released, and it is an interesting game. Ash, you're also playing this, correct?
I played it a little, but I've been a little busy.
It's a weird game. Like, I like it.
I like it.
Okay, the thing that I have trouble wrapping my head around is it feels very much like it should be an MMO, but is very much a single player game.
I mean, it's kind of got that Ubisoft open world feel.
Yeah.
Is it Ubisoft?
No,
It is not. It's published by THQ Nordic and developed by a relatively new developer.
I mean, it really reminds me of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Palladium role-playing games, because, like, you're some sort of mutant animal hybrid thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that you're playing dictates, like, some of your base stats. And then there's also classes on top of that, and all combined, it kind of dictates how you approach the game, because there's, melee, and then there's ranged combat, and they're both entirely valid ways to play. I ended up going with dual wield, and it has been interesting, but I also find myself using a gun quite a bit, just because there's some encounters where it's not really good to be in close range.
I do kind of hate those guys that grab you.
Yep. But, like, you're kind of piecing together the story of what happened in the world of a sort, but, like, the setting reminds me kind of Nier, in that it's like a post-apocalyptic world where humans used to be, but there's no humans there anymore. And instead there's various warring factions of mutant animals.
Is it as weird as Nier?
A little bit.
No,
I mean,
look, that bar is too high. No.
It's pretty weird.
Yeah.
Got it. So weird, but not way off the deep end.
Weird within reason.
I mean, definitely everything I've heard of it definitely makes it sound like After the Bomb, the computer RPG.
Yes, that's exactly what it seems like, is the After the Bomb expansion. Because, like, there's certain areas of the world that are, like, toxic for one reason or another, and in order to go adventuring in that area, you have to collect, like, a resist set, so that you can raise enough resistance to be able to roam around out there without taking damage. There's also really interesting characters,
who I gather all speak their own gibberish languages.
Yes.
They do, in fact.
And the narrator translates for you. This has been a point of contention for some people, I think.
Yes, enough that they've, like, changed. You have options to control the timing of how much gibberish you hear and how fast the narrator translates it and things like that. It was a major complaint when the game first released.
But, like, it's very, very open worldy in that, like, you've got a bunch of quest objectives, but it really doesn't matter if you complete any of them. You can kind of just roam around the world. I played it for a couple weeks in a row, and then I haven't gotten back to it, but it's interesting. Like, it's a good game. Like, I think it is a better game than some of the reviews would lead one to believe.
I don't know, like, almost a bunch of my absolute favorite games have Metacritics in the 70s, so whatever.
Yeah, hard same.
Yeah. It's almost like game quality is, subjective.
Deeply subjective.
Or something.
Well, I mean, I also kind of think that a game with a Metacritic in the 70s often, if not mostly, means it rarely means that it's just mediocre. It usually means that it's trying something interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm very here for that.
It's rather than necessarily being bad, it's polarizing.
Yeah.
It's definitely trying some interesting things. Like, it's very much a game that was kind of allowed to evolve on its own, and some of the things work really well and some of the things don't work as well. But, like, none of the things that don't work as well really bother me enough to detract from my gameplay experience. So, another game that we never actually got around to talking about is Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis released. And it kind of caught up on me. Like I was not aware it was releasing until I think Ash made some comment about it.
Surprise.
This is another one where it's like, I wish I had time to play video games in the past 2 weeks.
I mean, I wouldn't worry about getting caught up because it's not that hard to get caught up. And also, what caught up means is a real weird question. I've been playing a ton of this game, like probably more than anything else in the last couple of weeks. So I really liked a bunch of the core of PSO2. I loved the abilities. I liked the class. I liked the classes. I liked the kind of arcadey beat 'em up combat style. Like in an MMO. I thought that was neat. I didn't love the way I didn't love the closed in feeling of it. It's very much a lobby game, and I really don't like. I have the same problem with Destiny. Like Destiny feels like a tiny game to me because I'm only ever in the lobby or I'm on the planet in the specific area that I'm going to, and those spaces just don't feel that big to me. Partly because there's not a lot of like motion, there's not a lot of like transition between them, so I don't get a sense of space. PSO2 New Genesis gives me a whole bunch of space. Like it makes movement a thing. Like moving around the world is fun and quick and responsive, and I love it. Like climbing up mountains is fun, gliding down from mountains is fun, dodging around enemies is fun, exploring weird places is fun. It makes me wonder about the initial release of PSO2 because it's a decently big space, but it's not as big a space as I would have expected. And it doesn't have the biome variety that I would have expected. Like it doesn't have the same biome variety as PSO2 does. But there's a teaser for a whole other area.
Well, what does it have? Because PSO2 initially had like the green planet, the snow version of that planet, the lava planet, and then a bit of the ruins area.
So this has like a central city and
I guess it also had the desert.
Yeah, it's got a central city and like 5-ish zones that are relatively similar biomes. There's like a beachy area, there's a forest area, there's like an open wooded plains area, there's a mountain area. But they're all broadly a similar biome, even if they're not exactly the same. Like they're laid out differently, but it's not like, oh, this is the snow area, or this is the desert area, or this is the lava mountain area. I mean, I still put in like 15 hours, so there's quite a bit to do in that space. It's a game where I find myself getting caught up in the grind, actually, because you can get rolling from. I think so. PSO2 had the PSE burst, which was never really well explained to me, other than as far as like why it exists, and from what I was able to tell, it triggers when enough people are in a place killing enough things that suddenly a whole bunch more things come out of the woodwork. And it was pretty fun when you could make them happen.
That's basically true. It was just extremely difficult to trigger that by, like, even in a party. You need multiple parties mostly.
Yeah. So the transition to an open world is fantastic for this because its PSE bursts are more zone tied. And so once you're in a zone, like if you're in a zone and a bunch of people are also in that zone, you start bouncing from event to event, and those events are building up to a PSE burst. And so they happen pretty frequently. And there's a boss in them, there's a bunch of monsters, there's a bunch of mobs, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you're doing. And I think that it's a much more, also it explains what they are and what's going on there. Like there's a relatively thin, but at least it exists, narrative hook for why they happen, which is nice. Honestly, there's a lot of narrative hooks for everything the game is doing, so I can actually follow what's happening and why. And I'm not going to call it, it's not like it's the fast food of story, of like JRPG style storytelling, but whatever. It exists. It's got a lot of tropes. But yeah, I'm pretty excited. So the other thing that it does, and I don't like this quite as much, it consolidates your level and your gear and your like this number of skill points you've spent into a single number called battle power. And battle power is used to basically, battle power is a check on what areas and story stuff you can do, and like, can you participate in various events? Do you have enough battle power to participate in a particular event? And I found it to be a little bit, I had to do a little bit more grinding than I wanted to. Like, it's, if you just do the story missions, you'll be behind on battle power. And so in a few cases, there was another update that was like, get to this battle power. And I was like, okay, what do I do to improve that? Because it's hard to tell what actually makes that happen. Also, the game has augments. You can augment your weapons and armor to give them like bonus stats or whatever. You can spend more.
Please tell me the system is easier than it was in base PSO2.
This system is easier than it was in base PSO2, and I didn't really understand it in base PSO2 because it didn't explain it very well to me. It still didn't explain it very well to me here because it wasn't apparent that I could spend more than one augment on a weapon to increase the odds of it binding successfully.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've been like, man, 9-10% is a terrible, terrible chance. Ugh. So I burned through a whole bunch of augments fishing for a 10% chance and being frustrated that I couldn't get it any higher. And then I figured out how to actually do it, and suddenly my battle power jumped up like almost 100 points. It's like, oh, I can actually bind stuff.
I don't know what it is about the game that's not syncing with me. And I think like a lot of the things that you're enjoying about it are things I'm not enjoying about it. Because like across the board, it feels like what I'm doing is more pointless. I don't seem to get anywhere near the drops that I did in the previous game. So like, I don't know, like it seems like I'm always struggling for gear to equip.
Yeah.
And I really don't like the cocoons so far. They're like little movement-based things. And then other than that, like, all of the encounters feel real bullet spongy. Like, it takes forever to chew through them.
Huh. See, that's an interesting one, because
And it was that way for the hunter, and it was that way for the ranger.
I felt that way on Tector until I figured out where I needed to spend my points on Tector and actually get some real...
Get the actual main Tector ability?
Yeah, get the actual main Tector ability. And it like, some stuff is tough. And if I'm fighting something above my level, it can be pretty rough. But like, the only things that I think are bullets, the only things that feel bullet spongy are when I'm trying to fight something that's a group boss by myself.
Well, and that's kind of the annoyance that I've had roaming around is like, this does not have good like levels of encounters. Like, there's a lot of things that are like, oh, well, this is level 1 or this is level 15. And there's no middle ground between those two. So it doesn't feel like I'm gaining any progress fighting level 1s. But I can't do level 15s.
Yeah. It definitely has some of the same, like...
I wonder if that's that whole augment thing that Dan was talking about.
What, for...
Like, related to the missing level gap there.
Yeah.
Like maybe they expect you to fill that with gear.
Yeah, like on the hunter, I was experiencing the same thing, and like, I found a glitch in the Matrix, and you could talk to this one character multiple times, because for whatever reason, it was taking forever for the dialogue to really complete, so it flooded my inventory with items. So, like, I had capped out my items. So, like, the hunter had really nice stuff, but it still felt like it took forever to chew through anything.
I I was noticing that the getting a gear upgrade was starkly less meaningful than upgrading gear.
Oh, interesting.
Like leveling up your gear does a whole lot more for your power level than getting a new piece of gear. Which is really weird. Because like I had a piece of armor plus 20. Sorry, say again.
Can you recoup the expenditures you put into your gear?
So you basically level up your gear by feeding other gear into it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can feed leveled up gear into a new piece of gear.
How lossy is that? Becomes the question.
It's not lossy at all, but better quality gear takes more XP or whatever to level up. So like I had a piece of armor plus 20, or I had a weapon plus 30, and I got a higher star weapon and fed the plus 30 weapon into it, and it got to like plus 17. But that plus 17 was still better than the plus 30 had been.
Got it.
That's similar to what it would have been in the base game as well.
And so is the higher level gear going to have a higher top end is mostly what's going on there?
It's got a higher top end. It's got more augment slots. I'm not super sure because I haven't actually started seeing much higher level gear. Like I don't know what additional stars means for me. And augments are worth a shocking amount. And augments are like, sometimes your augments are like plus 2% potency on your melee weapons. And like, I've played MMOs. I know what 2%, because it's like, okay, so if I want to put a 2% on my melee weapon and my 3 armor pieces, yeah, 8% more damage is not a small thing. But yeah, it's kind of hard I find it kind of difficult to figure out what all of the levers are and which ones I should be pulling.
I did figure out how to flip over into the targeting mode, so Ranger feels a lot better than it did.
Oh, I can imagine. I may have spent like 5 hours securing a weapon camo for my Tector that I'm just going to use forever.
You are obsessed with having a sword on your Tector, aren't you?
Yes.
A class that is intended to have a mace.
Look, nope. Putting a sword on it. Took a lot of effort. I finally found one.
Their only weapon art in PSO2 was called Massive Hammer or something like that.
The interaction between there's a whole bunch of interactions that it took me a bit to figure out if I was doing them at all correctly. Because like once I started figuring out what I was doing and started firing on all cylinders, I was like, oh, okay, these things that felt like a pain to kill and like they took forever, actually I just tear through now. But it took a lot of like, oh, getting a new gear upgrade matters less than leveling up my gear, and I should be leveling up my gear as much as I possibly can. I actually like the obstacle course cocoons, but
is this a game where vendoring gear is a mistake? Just feed gear to feed all your gear?
I'm not getting enough gear to be able to vendor any of it. I basically need to pour it all into upgrades.
Oh yeah. No, I pour all of my gear into upgrades. I'm not sure I could tell you where to sell gear if I had it to sell. But I did have some of what Belle was talking about with the like mobs feel bullet spongy. Basically right up until I got to like level 10 or so, and started going into the like abandoned laboratory area or the abandoned research lab, where there's a lot of there's like a whole lot of events going on and people going around in circles in those events. And it's both good for levels and also really, really good for drops. You get lots and lots of stuff coming, and that boosted my power really, really fast. And there's also levels of augments. Like there's an augment trader that lets you trade augments into better augments. I haven't really delved into that too much, so I don't really know where to find augments. But I think last night I hit there's a threshold to be able to get to all of the high end content. So there's the tier 2 of every zone, which is basically a max level version of that zone. There's the emergency alerts, and I just hit the battle power necessary to try those, and so I'm going to see what that looks like. Plus, I can play a red mage. It's actually pretty great, and people like having me around because I have the buff. Once upon a time,
I'm surprised you didn't actually try Detector in base PSO2.
I probably should have, but base PSO2 did not adequately explain to me what was going on with Tector.
Mm.
And I absolutely couldn't figure it out by reading its skill tree. I'm very curious about its release cadence. Like, what is their release schedule going to look like? But I could see myself popping back in this one every time they have a big content drop.
If I can ever get to a point where like it feels good to play, I mean, I keep trying it because I know eventually I will hopefully get there. Given how much I enjoyed the original version of this, I do like the fact that you can kind of hop back and forth between the two at will.
That is so weird, but works shockingly well.
It was so weird to me to like log in and have a full set of characters.
Full set of characters that are like, hey, what class am I now?
Yeah, what do I want to be today? And for the most part, like, I made everything the thing that it was previously, but I was playing things that still exist.
I was not. Oh, it also plays real well with a controller.
I would hope so, since it's also how I was planning to play it.
Yeah, no, it works really well on a controller, and I like it a lot.
That's good. I will have to try that then.
It's free, or at least free to download.
Wonder if we'll ever get the Switch client.
Maybe.
I'm not actually clear what you would pay for in PSO2.
I mean, same thing.
I mean, my answer previously was looking cool.
I mean, really, it's looking cool and or bank space.
I'm going to say the premium set is still a thing.
Yeah. I don't know what I guess I don't really know what the premium set gets you other than the ability to sell things to other players.
The storage.
Oh, fair.
So much additional material storage.
Yeah, all right.
I guess material storage is going to be subscribed to premium. Sort of like USO.
Yeah. You could just walk up and say deposit into my bank, and it works.
Yep. I have a whole bunch of old game stuff sitting in premium and material storage that I can't get to right now. I don't know if I have any use for it. I have so much stuff sitting in my bank in PSO2 that I don't think I need any more. I guess if I went back to old PSO2 and played that some, maybe I would need some of it.
I liquidated a whole bunch of stuff into PSO2 to afford fashion.
Yeah.
I have zero regrets.
Can you transfer funds from one to the other?
No.
You can't transfer funds, but you can transfer certain items. You can transfer gear to your
cosmetic
Pending
gear.
the gear actually works in the second game. Some of it doesn't.
If the gear has a type analog in the new game, so like if it's a weapon used by a class that exists in New Genesis, then you can transfer it over and just use it.
And outfits and baseware and stuff. You can use all that.
Like, yeah, and all of the cosmetics will transfer. You should absolutely not do this thing, by the way. You should, like, weapons from the base game
They're so awful.
garbage.
They are.
And a
may
thing that you
want to bring
acquired.
over one or two because it looks cool, but other than that, no, don't use them.
And you can only sell an item in the game in which you acquired it. So no getting cosmetics in the base game and then selling them in the new game to try and transfer money.
Yeah, you also cannot upgrade base game like classic items in New Genesis, which is a real killer.
But all your cosmetic gear transfers.
Yeah, I could totally wear my Majima suits.
Yes, and that is 100% what I liquidated so much stuff so I could have the like 45 million Meseta needed to buy the cosmetic thing that I wanted, but I got it. Damn it.
I'm still running around as a PSO1 ranger or a cast. I stopped being a Gundam.
I thought the Gundam look was funny, though.
On my hunter, I'm one of those military general outfits with the cape.
Mm-hmm.
That was from one of the scratch-offs.
Yep.
I suddenly regret not doing the Sword Art Online stuff.
I mean, I really like the cosmetic system in both games. That basically you can gamble for the appearances, or you just buy them off the open market because they're all sellable for the most part. But then again, that was kind of the SWTOR thing too.
There is a limited set of appearance items that is not sellable and also not gambleable for that you purchase with Star Gems.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of annoying that there's no real way to get those other than the various sources of Star Gems, which would be buying them directly, which again, you should never, ever, ever do.
Mm-hmm.
Or the Battle Pass, or
wearing
from
outfits.
the various other things that reward Star Gems, like completing achievements and
I was going to say,
wearing outfits.
Is this as much you should never do this as buying currency directly from Warframe?
Yes, exactly like that. You should never buy full price platinum from Warframe either. If you want platinum, you should use one of the other ways to get it, including possibly buying bundles that have platinum in a significant discount.
Yup.
Yes, do not buy Star Gems. It is a waste of money.
Buy
But
Star Gems
some
through
things
other
you can
means.
only get with Star Gems, so it's kind of annoying. I don't know if they're still doing that.
My instincts from FF14 paid off as well. I had gotten a handful of Hatsune Miku stuff and was like, I'm not going to go to the trouble of selling it now. That stuff is worth a lot. Hatsune Miku has bankrolled my my fashion sense.
Go through and see what I have to sell of that. That's not particularly my jam either.
I remember I sold something silly to buy something else silly from the same set. I think I got a hairstyle. May have been one of the Hatsune Miku ones, but that's how I picked up the tail. And I wear on my character basically all the time now.
So we probably have enough time for this next topic, and it's probably going to be a very surface level discussion because I know there are people in this channel that will want to play this game if, they can find a PlayStation 5.
Are you saying that Insomniac made a game with cool platforming and cool weapons and I want to play it?
Yeah.
So very quick. So we're talking about Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Is this where all of my Jet Force Gemini gameplay has been hiding? Because I loved
Yes.
Jet Force Gemini.
I mean, basically, yes.
And I thought they just stopped making those games.
They did.
Well, and now they make... So I've never played a Ratchet and Clank before this.
There's like an entire series of great games for you to catch up on.
Yeah, well, how playable are they becomes a quick question.
Extremely.
Yeah,
So
extremely.
I would definitely...
Maybe not the first one.
You may already have access to the one that came out on the PlayStation 4, depending on how up-to-date you've been with grabbing games from...
I have not. But I could pick it up, right?
Yeah, it's really good, too.
So yeah, the original first one, like, that was before they figured out that maybe people want to control this game like a third-person shooter.
Okay.
So that one's a little hard to go back to. But other than that, yeah, they're all perfectly playable.
Interesting.
No, Ratchet and Clank has been for a decade more.
More than that.
Ratchet and Clank has been the premier third person 3D platformer series other than Mario since the PS2 era.
Yeah, I mean, I remember playing these on the PS2.
Yeah, the first one came out in 2002.
But the second one was significantly better than the first one.
Second one was much better.
So this game is, I feel like, if I'm not missing my mark, heavily referencing the first one.
So sit down. This might take a bit. When they started the PS3, they sort of rebooted the series.
Okay.
And so after that reboot, there's a mini trilogy, well, quadrilogy, I guess, for the PS3. And this is sort of continuing off of the end of those games.
Okay. What was the PS4 game then?
PS4 game was a remake of the first one, sort of. They changed the story quite a bit to line up with the movie.
And all that. The PS4 game is definitely playable. It's good.
PS4 game is quite good.
Yeah, so there's just like this game definitely feels like, hey, you've played Ratchet and Clank a bunch before. Let's just name drop a whole bunch of characters and not explain who they are.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that because this is basically the 5th game in a series after a reboot.
I have no idea. I have no idea what any of these characters are, but like honestly, it doesn't matter.
It does not, because they are all different versions of that character, and I'm learning these versions of the character. But it's like there's definitely that moment where it's like, is that Rusty Pete? And I'm like, who the heck is Rusty Pete? No, I'm not Rusty Pete. I'm Pierre Lafaire. Okay. Translator's note: Pierre Lafaire is Rusty Pete in French.
Yes, well.
But yeah, so. I don't know. It's got fun movement. I've got jump, double jump, dash.
All games should have double jump.
It has some absolutely hot nonsense set pieces. Like, just honestly, like, I am shocked at what this game can do in real time.
So it's very funny, Tam, because you know what this game is really reminding me about this week? It's reminding me of It Takes Two, both in movement and in set pieces.
Oh yeah, but like the set pieces in Ratchet and Clank are absolutely nonsense.
Yeah.
Like there's actually some parts that are a little bit too visually busy to parse because there's just so much going on in real time.
Like, this game has one of the best intro levels. It's amazing.
I love the intro level, and I love what it's doing in the intro level, but boy, was it hard to visually parse.
On a scale of 1 to Mega Man X, where are we at?
Oh, much higher than Mega Man X.
In terms of stuff going on?
Yeah.
No, in terms of how good the intro level is.
Oh.
It's not Mega Man X.
It's not Mega Man X.
Not
okay.
A long shot. But it's fun, and it's a nice like weave into what's going on. I could have done with a little bit less individually rendered confetti. Like
so
this is one of those, hey, this is a game we specifically developed for the PS5.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I actually crashed on the intro.
They're throwing you a parade.
No, so okay, let's comment a little bit. They're throwing you a parade, which is trying to help new players understand who all of these characters are. Cool, great. Everything is so busy that I can't follow any of the conversation about what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, it is stunning, absolutely stunning.
It is incredibly stunning.
I cannot understand what these narrators are, these various like people are saying, who are also apparently big characters from previous games. This is the first game where I was like, I've unlocked the codex. Let me go through and read all of the information I wasn't supposed to know yet. I don't know yet. I'm supposed to know from playing other games.
But also, it's like the most Saturday morning cartoons game I've ever played in my life.
Oh, absolutely.
And as a result, I can tell that it doesn't really matter. I can tell who the good guys are. I can tell who the bad guys are.
That guy in a green outfit is not actually a good guy.
The superhero?
Yes.
He's okay. He's not really a major player yet, but okay.
That makes sense. Just letting you know. His usual role is to either be a good guy very poorly or to unknowingly be a bad guy.
He seems to be a bad guy right now. He seems to be an unknowing, a good guy poorly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, tracks.
I mean, it's not like he was any better at being a bad guy, so whatever.
I mean, at this point...
I mean, he's basically Zap Brannigan from Futurama.
Yeah. I was going to say, at the point at which I see somebody wearing a full body neon jumpsuit with like that little superhero eye mask and a like skin tight hood, I'm already, especially if they're like, if they give me the body style where they've got two like tiny little legs but giant torso and arms, I'm already there thinking like, all right, here is the bumblingly incompetent / actively harmful while trying to be a do-gooder character. And especially if they're like smiling broadly, yeah, definitely. If they're like grinning, 100%, this person is like at best a bumbling do-gooder.
So spoilers for a 19-year-old game here, but in the first game he's actively a villain, and in most of the rest of the series he's just bad at being good. Most of the rest of the series.
Nice.
No, okay.
The remake makes it significantly more upfront about him not being a good guy immediately.
I'm just here to play this fox guy trying to find his robot husband. I'm completely on board with this. I don't know anything about Ratchet and Clank, but this is my headcanon and I'm sticking to it.
I mean, it's not that far off.
They're adorable and I wish them all the best.
I mean, Clank is probably the best thing about Ratchet and Clank.
I mean, they spent a giant chunk of the game before also, separated immediately. So they've had a bit to explore this space.
Yeah, I am enjoying these various characters. Now, is this the first game in which there is in fact a second Lombax, or has that been explored elsewhere?
So
It's also been explored elsewhere.
yeah.
And I don't want to say too much more to give you spoilers for games you might actually play.
Okay.
But other Lombaxes show up extremely rarely. Like extremely, extremely rarely.
Everybody seems to know what they are, though.
Yeah, which is weird.
That seems a little weird, but they were historically important.
Yeah, they were like famous heroes.
Well, and
now there's like 3 of them.
There's definitely Lombax technology, which seems to be important.
Yeah, they may have violated their Prime Directive and it kind of bit them a bit.
Ah.
No.
The Prime Directive being don't give other people your tech.
Yep.
That kind of makes sense.
I mean, having played a bunch of these, this might be the best one of them so far.
My favorite previously was probably the second PS3 one. So we'll see how this goes. If I can ever get a PS5.
I mean, if at some point you want to borrow a PS5, let me know. Possibly with Ratchet and Clank loaded on it.
Fair enough.
I mean, I think I have used up all of my good luck considering I have a PS5 and now a 3080, so...
Bell, you are an endless font of good luck. That's what we know about you.
I mean, you got a 3080 using the traditional route for getting one at this point by spending slightly more than the Scalper price and getting the entire rest of the computer.
Yeah, that's basically it. Because I did look up the specific model, so I guess, to make this make sense, the reason why I might sound weird is because I moved into an entirely new system this week, and it's because I happened to be looking at systems and noticed, oh hey, here's some in stock, and Newegg has this thing where they use this seller called ABS, which I think is just basically Newegg, and they will sell machines as pre-builts for essentially the price of the pieces. So yeah, I ended up getting a entire machine for $2,600 or so. But the thing is that you don't know what card you're getting other than the general classification of your card. It is whatever the hell was in stock. And I ended up with a Asus ROG Tough overclocked edition, whatever. So one of the premium SKUs that in itself seems to be going for like $2,500.
Ridiculous.
So I figured worst case scenario, I could probably part it out and make it back. I do really hope that consoles come in before too much longer, because I have heard it is just as hard to get an Xbox Series X.
Yeah, at this point, yes.
Like, it was not the case at first, but that has changed. Although, supposedly there was a big shipment of PS5s that were up for sale on Sony. And I know 2 or 3 people that managed to get them there, so maybe
I just tried during that and did not get one.
Maybe the stock is going to loosen up. I don't know. I mean, the silicon shortage is still a thing. Car lots are still mostly empty.
What do you mean car lots are mostly empty?
Have you
it's
been
hard to
by
buy
a car lot?
Oh.
All cars have computers in them these days.
Yeah.
Oh,
And computers need
interesting.
microchips.
The shortage of new cars is so severe that it has driven up the price of used cars to the point where people are discovering that their used cars are appreciating in value.
Yeah.
In some cases.
I know someone who just sold. When they bought a new car, they didn't sell their old car. And then they went to go sell their old car, and they made more than what they paid for it.
Well, wow.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. This is not a thing that happens with cars ever.
No. But yeah, and I mean, the cars are ready. Like, the cars themselves are entirely ready. They just need some chips to put in, and there's no chips. Like, we just bought a new car about a month and a half ago, and we got very lucky, and they had just gotten one in that was almost exactly what we wanted the previous day, that was ready to go. It was not the color that I really wanted, but it was good enough. There was one out that had been delivered that was the color I wanted and would have been exactly what we wanted, but it didn't have a computer yet, and just no way of knowing when it'll get one. So
yeah, I mean, I've seen pictures from like a Ford plant where there's like 1,000 some F-150s just sitting out in this field, and they can do nothing with any of them because they don't have computers to stick in them.
It is madness. So yeah, if you've got old, I don't know, pretty much anything at this point, it sounds like, that involves computer chips, maybe see if you can sell it for more than you paid for it. Because right now it seems like we've got graphics cards, motherboards, cars. This is a weird timeline.
It's a very weird timeline.
Yeah, like I did look up what I could basically flip my 1080 Ti for, and it's well more than what I paid for it initially. 4 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I passed mine on to somebody who was building a computer, and the level of excitement that they had for a half-decade-old graphics card was concerning.
I've got a friend that I may end up handing him mine because he has a 1070, and that 1080, at least in the interim until something can be purchased, is a significant upgrade over the 1070.
Mm-hmm.
It's real weird, folks. It's real weird. The weirdest part about this is that, I've noticed YouTube channels don't necessarily want to cover graphic cards right now because they end up getting a backlash in the comments, of basically covering things that are unobtainium.
That's so weird.
Anyway,
Yep.
it's time, so we will see you next week. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Bye.
Happy Father's
Good
Day.
night.
Were you dads around there when you finally listened to the show?
Yeah, that's right. This will be releasing on Father's Day, so happy Father's Day.
It will.
Bye.
Watch
Good
Loki.
night.
Good night.
See you.